So welcome to the mBIT Global Wisdom Support Call. I hope that you can all hear me, and welcome to those who are here in person and those who are listening and in a replay. We're going to be talking all things mBIT Roadmap to set those good solid foundations on which the heuristic process of mBIT is then kind of led. So I'm going to open it up for questions or workings with it where you've used it and it's gone really well, or you've based something on it and you've got stuck, or feel free to start a conversation going.
So Suzanne, I did a session this week, and I went in and the client was very, very head based. So she had done some other work in a different modality. So I went in, and because I can't feel this, I can't feel that, I ended up taking her out and going into a timeline therapy, which served. It was perfect. It was meant to happen. What else could I have perhaps done?
Now, you know what I do with questions like that, right? So we have however many people on the line, 18 people on the line. What else could she have done in that session?
I'm curious, what do you mean you took her in and then you had to take her out?
Oh, no. So, yes, sorry. So basically she was in her coherent breathing state. We brought the compassion into the heart. We added the color. And she was like, oh, I feel a bit silly. I think this, and she was very head based, and she was, she was really questioning the process. And we'd already sort of discussed, there was a lot of things going on, and, from her past. And so I ended up just going into a timeline which served the purpose for the client, and it was the perfect outcome. And now she's actually practicing her coherent breathing before we actually work together in a couple of weeks. So
So can I just clarify, where did you get to in the roadmap, and at what point did you kind of make the conscious decision to leave the roadmap and leave mBraining?
Okay, so we were in coherent breathing for about 4 minutes, but she could only get to in for 3 and out for 3. I told her that was perfect. She's like, oh, but I'm not doing it right. I said, there is no right and wrong, and it's perfect for you and whatever. And then, I said, we came into the heart center. We had the compassion, we added a color, and then she started sort of questioning that. She was kept questioning everything. So at that point, I then decided to exit and go into the timeline so that we could then go and practice further, because it was an online session. So I felt that it would have been quite difficult for me. Rather, I could have sort of spent a session just getting her to practice coherent breathing, but she was looking at an outcome, etc., in that time frame. So that's why I exited and did that.
Okay. So if before someone else asks a question, right, what have you all just heard linked to the topic tonight of the roadmap? Are you all right with us playing with this, Colette?
Oh, perfect. Absolutely.
You're all right with it still being recorded?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what did you hear about the roadmap? If you were going to go, if there is such a thing as true to the mBIT model, and that beautiful image that I put out on one of the posts today, that is just the roadmap. What comments or what are you curious about that you might want to follow up on that?
I'm curious what the head was doing talking after you said that you got to the stage of compassion.
Yeah, so for me,
which sounds to me like you had already gone through communication and congruence, and you were doing a highest expression. Is that right?
I had just sort of, at first, I was just practicing the coherent breathing with her. And then I was just seeing if she would go in, because she'd been questioning a lot of stuff with something else I'd done with her. So I was seeing if she could get out of the head into the heart. And she just kept allowing her head brain with, I think this, I think that, I don't think this. And yeah, so clearly she wasn't just being, in the coherent breathing.
So you were at the point where you were just starting the communication with the brains. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And you were trying to talk to her heart, but her head was taking over?
Yes.
What would I have done?
Yes.
Removed her head.
Remove head. Perfect.
Yeah. Like literally, like I do this with clients all the time. I will get them to literally pick up their head and put it over there, or ask it to leave the room.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
What are you laughing at, Suzanne?
No, I love that. I have never thought of actually physically removing a head, or even pretending that I move a head, but I love it. I love it. Yes.
On a lighter note, I wish some of the leaders I experienced remove their heads.
I feel like we all need to remove our heads every now and then. And it sounds really silly, but like doing something, I do silly things like this all the time with clients, and it works because they have this image. I'll ask them, can you just ask your head to leave the room for a minute, please? This is adult talk. I'll be like, this is talk for the grown-ups. Ask your head to leave the room and just go stand outside the door for a minute.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful pattern interrupt.
Yes.
As someone who was very head brain, you might find some resistance to being shut out the room. And it might be that the head goes, actually, no, I'm not going out the room because I think I have something important to say. And so go for it and have a go. If the head resists going outside the room, it might be that it might be happy to stand in the corner, or it might be happy to, sit on the next chair or somewhere a little bit less excluded, so it can still hear everything that's going on. And you can reassure it that you will come back to it to include it in the conversation later. But right now, it needs to, in no uncertain terms, be quiet. I sometimes use different words if I'm playing provocative, depending if I have a client that I have enough rapport that I can be a little bit more provocative with.
It was my first session with her, so I was quite mindful. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Kerry?
I would be wondering, as you were getting her into the communication phase, were you reminding her about the highest expressions of each of the brains? Because sometimes
I just gone into the heart, and because she sort of kept questioning, and a colleague that I work with said she was really head-based with him as well, I was very mindful of that. So that's why I went with the other pathway.
And possibly to something that works for me that may not be exactly correct is shift the foundational sequence slightly, so that you say, oh yeah, okay, the heart wants to do the talking now. What does the heart want to the head want to tell the heart that help it to communicate or something? Involve it.
Okay. Yep.
But I don't know whether that is just taking the foundational sequence out of sequence slightly, but bringing it back into the heart quickly.
Well, it's an interesting point, because at communication level, you don't need to be in foundational sequence. Okay. What is the key point of calibrating? When we really get into present state, desired outcome, what stops you? What is the key result or outcome you want from calibrating at that level?
The easiest access, the easiest of the three.
Easiest access point and possible leverage point. right? But the easiest access point, that easiest access point may not be heart. So it might not be a foundational sequence at communication level.
That's what I was trying to say in words, but couldn't.
Beautiful. And I thought that's what you were getting at. That's why I wanted to highlight it, because you are spot on, right? Because you can go and communicate in any order and actually bounce all over the place. So especially if you've got someone who's got a very strong, any of the brains, but especially head brain, you might have to bounce around several times before you get nice communication from all three. That's why it's split in layers in the roadmap. The first layer is only communication. And the heart may not tell you everything the first time you go there. So you might get a little bit from heart, then you might go, well, wherever, you might go down to gut, you might go to head. And if the head is that desperate to say something, the other thing you can do is say, right, what is it that it is absolutely essential that the head lets us know now? Have you say, you've got 30 seconds or whatever. I wouldn't say 30 seconds, but, you know, tell me what the key things are so that you've had your say, and we will come back and talk to you later. Are you okay now if you just keep quiet long enough to allow the heart and gut to have their say? Is that okay? And then you might bounce back down to heart and gut, and then you might go back to head, and then you might bounce back down to heart and gut again. We're still only at the communication level. We haven't gone anywhere. So that communication level can be as simple as once round each of the three brains, or it can be really complicated and it can keep moving around all over the place.
So at that level of communication, we're just getting what all three brains are saying. Is that correct?
Basically. So what else? What if you were kind of doing a peer supervision session with Colette, and she was saying, so is communication just about hearing what the three have to say? What else might you add in around the communication with each of the three brains? So is it just what they have to say, or are you going to ask any particular questions or foci?
I would ask also, I don't know if it's in a later stage, but or if it's also communication, but I would also ask the brains if they are willing to work together. And then I would ask also, what does the heart need from the head or from the gut?
So that's kind of moving up to congruence.
Okay.
So once you've got good communication from all three, then you're going to take that next step up to the congruence and getting them all to play nicely with each other. But at communication level, what else have we not said around what you're going to ask the brains, or what else you're working with at the communication level?
I would be looking at not only what do the brains have to say, but their behaviors, like the fact that the heart doesn't get a chance to say anything because the head keeps jumping in and squashing it. And just things like I suppose non-verbal communication from the brains and how they interact with each other, apart from all of the things that you're asking and they're telling you.
Beautiful. So you'd be doing that as part of your calibration the whole time. What you're talking about there, you haven't mentioned the word nick, but really you're looking for what nicks and nibs are in place. Is one of the brains dominating? Is one of them, you know, arguing with the other? Are they in open conflict with each other? So yeah, you're going to be calibrating that all the time. Do you know when you ask a question and you know exactly what you're looking for, it seems really obvious, and obviously I've not asked it in such a way. So the thing I was looking for and what I would be doing at communication level is also making sure that you've covered all of the prime functions in each of the brains. So that you don't just talk to the heart, say, about values. You also make sure you talk about relational affect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you also make sure you talk about feelings. And that's why that beautiful one flip chart page that talks, you know, is just the sentence lead in really for the questions. Beautiful. Yeah, Faye's got it. So if you haven't trained with me, you might not recognize that sheet. I print that out for all of mine as a one sheet cheat sheet, basically, that if you've got that in front of you, you've got pretty much everything you need in one kind of eye shot. But you'll remember the questions from the flip chart, I'm sure. You know, what does the head really think? What does the head really know? What does the heart truly feel? What does the gut deeply need? And there are 3 in each of the brains, and they're lined up to ask for each of the prime functions in each of the 3 brains.
So we've got in this one, so head, we've got head really. So I always ask, what does head really? We've got perceive, think, and mean. So is it perceives with stories? Do we go across that way?
Yes. Yes. So basically, if you track across the columns, it gives you kind of, if you get stuck, there's a question for you by just going across the columns.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I generally go in and ask, what does it really desire? What does it feel? Who do you connect with? Or what does it connect with? And so, yeah, it's sort of, yeah. Okay.
So just a kind of, you know, because you lot are all really keen on professional development, that's why you're here. So we're taking you up a level, right? I personally wouldn't mix really and desire, because really takes you to head and desire is heart.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. I was just giving an example. I always say truly want, desire, truly feel, truly connect with. Yeah, I always use this in front of me and I go across. So really perceive, think, mean, truly want, desire, feel, connect with, and deeply need, move by, and identify with.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay.
And it just means if you're stuck at any point, you can go back to that one sheet and you can go, oh yeah, I haven't asked anything. The heart said quite a lot, but all it's talked to me about is what might it, you know, it's really angry about something. You go, that's interesting. Well, who else is involved? Let's go in for relational affect here. Well, let's go in for values. Why is it important? So communication is more than just what do each of the brains want to say. There's a structure to the communication.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Faye.
I guess for me too, when I'm working with people that are very head-based, I tend to take...
lovely people. They're lovely people.
Oh, yes. Well,
yeah, that's
I've been them myself. I tend to spend a bit more time on the setup, and I've been using one of those audios that you can use on the mBraining website. My favourite's the symbols and the ocean waves, Tibetan symbols and ocean waves. And I've used it online and in person to help really focus the head brain on listening to that. And I've just found that that's been quite successful in minimising the head, taking over and interrupting, and just making sure that all the questions are asked before we get going. And I've found that setup helps me with that, and just to be able to connect in. And you can be cheeky during the communication and say, look, what does the head want to say? And then say, right, well, then you've just got to keep quiet for a bit. But it's about having built that rapport that you can be cheeky too, of course. But I did find that tools like for the breathing, so that there's something for the head brain to focus on, to listen out for, tends to be effective in disengaging it from getting, taking over and, getting that monkey mind still going on after you have been doing the breathing. So that was just something that I thought I'd mention that I've found to be quite useful compared to when I haven't used it.
Yeah, beautiful. And reminder, they're all free downloads off of mbraining.com. So there's a variety of different versions, one with a C in the background, one with a bell, one with a symbol. So you can pick the one you like. For anyone else online who recognizes...
so we can have those on in the background.
Yeah. When you're doing the balanced breathing, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
remember,
perfect.
if someone's very auditory stimulated, it might put them off. They might go, oh, the noise is annoying. So it is about each client and getting familiar with what works for them. For anyone else online who is or can imagine being head brain orientated, right? When you're breathing, And when you're maybe listening to an auditory prompt, or you're watching the bouncy ball or some visual prompt, does that work for someone who's very head dominated? So there's some nods, and it might do. For some people it might. If it didn't, and if I was still sat there dominated by my head going, well, that's very interesting. I wonder what note that is, and I wonder where they were when they did that recording, and I wonder what sort of bowl that they used. Anyone else got a head brain that sometimes does that?
Yeah.
How can you absolutely shut that head brain up enough to kind of gently but force me into coming into what you're trying to do with me as balanced breathing? What else do you know about that you could advise me to do?
So I would put my hand on my heart, and I would invite my client to do the same, because it just immediately, for me, it immediately calms me down. And with heart entrainment, I would hope that it would do the same with the client. If there is some kind of resistance, you could almost say, can you visualize yourself putting your hand on your heart and maybe closing your eyes?
Beautiful, beautiful. So all of these things are stacking the odds in your favor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a really head-based resistant client, and I'm still going, but I'm thinking about that music that you played and those sea waves, and I wonder if they were in Melbourne when they recorded those, or whether they were down in Locksport. Or Beth?
Yeah, so what I guess what I've done with head-based people is say, okay, can you recognize where you are? Are you in your head right now? So kind of lead to try to figure out where they're at, and pay attention to the pace of their language, because quite often it's going to be at the pace. Yeah, I'm still thinking of this. I'm thinking. So pace, lead. So at their so are you in your head right now? It sounds like you're in your head. Can you think? Can you imagine you're in your head right now?
Yeah, I am. I can't really get out of my head. Yeah, I'm in my head.
Yeah, right. So you can't, never, could, do nothing, right? So let's just imagine now that you could. I know you can't, but just imagine you could get down into, and then when you're ready, you just drop down into. So we slow the breathing, and it might feel good to bring your hand down. And it might feel good to close your eyes and just feel yourself. So I might guide them visually with my hand, with my voice, and tonally just bring them right down now. Can you tell the difference between being here and being in your head?
Beautiful. See? So you were listening in. What did Beth do? What were the techniques she used? She said pace and lead, but what was she doing?
She did the touch and feel,
and touch, like
Emily
said, yeah.
Yeah.
And
she slowed her voice down.
Slowed down her voice, and
I assume you're looking for the closing of the eyes going into the body.
I wasn't, but that was another thing. Yeah, she invited to close the eyes. Yeah, and
she slowed her own breathing down.
Slowed her own breathing, and
choice. And she gave the client a lot of choice.
Gave me choice. ANS loves choice. ANS feels safe in choice. Yeah,
and she used a hand to keep dropping down.
Used the hand, so there was a double kind of set up for dropping into the body. Yeah, and there was so much stuff in that, Beth. I don't know if you even realise the enormity of it. And we all listened in, right? And sometimes it's good to deconstruct. Hang on a minute. That's excellence in process. How do we model excellence? By breaking it into every step and understanding what she did so that we can repeat it.
And her voice also went from high to low, and it got much slower.
Beautiful. So there was a tone as well as a speed of voice. The tone dropped. Yeah. So you see how in some respects, if you saw that on a piece of paper as pace and lead and slow things down, it would look really simple. But when you bring in, what was that, maybe 7 or 8 different steps, all that supported each other, you have just stacked your bases. And I was trying to role play, and I was struggling to resist, right? Because it was so effective, I couldn't then resist going there. So the only other thing I might add, and this is only from my own experience of being very head-based, is something that works for me sometimes is distracting that inner voice and giving it a job. So ask the inner voice to do the counting for you while doing everything that Beth just beautifully modeled. And it's almost like you stack your success so that anyone pretty much is going to go with you, however head-based or out of body, you know, they are. And I would argue I would keep doing that until they did come with me. I wouldn't move on and try and get into communication until I was sure I'd got them into coherence. Because otherwise you're just giving them an outlet again to resist you the minute you go into communication. And I mean, you know, this is not something to be proud of, but some of you will have heard me say before, my worst case scenario was 2.5 hours with a guy to get him into coherence. And I was not moving on until he was, because there was, you know, we know the process is iterative. By that, it means if you don't do that prep and you haven't got rapport and you haven't got coherence, you won't get communication. If you don't get communication, you won't get congruence. If you haven't got congruence, you won't get highest expression. So every step of the way on that roadmap, spending time and making sure that that's well established will set you up for success. I think when people find that the process doesn't work or whatever, what they've done is come out of process or tried to move on too fast to the next level.
Perhaps that's what I did, Suzanne. So yeah, I went, and it was good because after the timeline therapy, then she realized when she kept saying think, she's like, oh my God, I am always in my head. So now her homework is to put her hands on her heart and start feeling. So every time something happens for her, how do I feel? So that's sort of her build up, and she's downloaded the app so she can practice all this. She's like, oh my God, this is already changing my life. So it was a great setup, perfect. But I'm so grateful to be on here getting so many tips.
And great awareness, right, for you, Colette. But we knew that just from the way you described what had happened, because what was the key to us knowing that that's what Colette had done, that Colette had jumped up the roadmap too quickly and not established the earlier phases? What was the key to you that went, oh, hang on, she's not on the roadmap journey?
The head taking over and not letting, you weren't getting close. Well, for me, it was 4 minutes often isn't enough for some people, and it's really, you take as long as you need to until you can observe that they're really in a good place. And when you start moving into, if it's, you know, doing the functional sequence, then the heart, and then it's like, you know, quite often you just go back to the breathing rather than try to push things.
So that was a good indicator, right? That 4 minutes, I think for most clients, 4 minutes into coherent breathing, especially like as a first client, that's really fast.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, because it takes a little while to describe it. You know, it takes a little while to talk about posture. It takes a little while to talk about even rhythm. And then you kind of got to give them a little bit, especially if they're head brain, time to drop into their body, time to get into that. So yeah, speed was one thing. The other thing, go on, anyone else? There was a couple of other bits that I went, oh, hang on, alarm bell ringing.
Yeah, she mentioned the word compassion.
Yeah, she did. So where does compassion come in terms of taking compassion into the heart?
During balanced breathing.
On the roadmap.
On the roadmap, it's right at the end. It's the highest expression.
Highest expression. It's the last step that we do. So that was one sign, is hang on, how are we at highest expressions already when we're not even at balanced breathing? And there was another bit that I would have probably placed at congruence that you mentioned. So what was the other thing that you heard? And it was around the same time. So it was around compassion, and it was about taking.
The head was taking over the job of the heart.
Say again.
I think the head was taking over the job of the heart at congruence level. So it was blocking the connection.
Yeah, but even in terms of process, what else did Colette describe that she did at heart level? When she got a bit stuck, you tried all sorts of things, which is great. It's great to have flexibility. It's great to be agile in the process. There was one other bit I went, oh, hang on a minute. I think that's too soon because you're not yet in congruence. It was about taking a colour in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the colour, I'm going to throw the question out to you. So where would you start working with the colour of something? Where does that come in the roadmap?
That's right up, isn't it? It's
What's the mBIT name for bringing colours and texture and size and all of that in? It's one of the acronyms. We got NICs and NIBs and NIs. Yeah, and the NIs are at the second part of the congruence step, where you ask them for a resource or a value that you're then going to take round foundational sequence, and you ask them to describe it to you. Is it a picture? Is it a metaphor? Is it a color? Is it a feeling? And then you ramp that up using the submodalities if you're NLP based, or the NIs with the mBIT kind of flavor on it. And you change those colors and textures and sizes, and you just amp up that resource or value, and then take that round the foundational sequence. So that's at the second part of congruence level. So there was a few things in what you said that I felt like, you know, because she hadn't easily gone with you, you'd kind of thrown all your tools in the box at one go to try and get her into an mBIT frame of mind.
Okay. Yep.
So the big question then for me is, and you guys can answer this, if I was a relatively new inexperienced coach and I was doing that, what advice would you give me? Because I'm only doing it with good intention and I want the best for my client. I'll try something else. I'll try something else. What advice would you give me?
I would gently ask you if you're maybe in your head.
There's a brave woman. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So just speaking of personal experience, I've been there, and it's not a comfortable experience as a coach to be in your head whilst you want your client to be communicating with all of their brains.
Beautiful.
And it's such an amazing shift, and I advise you and invite you, and I do that with me as well, and I really realized the difference for me is to do it before the session, and not just 2 minutes before, but really practice it, you know, when you're doing the dishes or when you're doing something else, to go, am I in my head right now, or can I, you know, am I embodied, just to flex the muscle, because we all know that embraining is super powerful, and it's even more powerful when you're coaching from all of the brains yourself.
Beautiful.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so I may or may not have been in my head. I don't know. But what else would you advise me? Because there's lots of things I can do as a coach to improve my practice. Getting into my body myself is one thing. What else could I do? Robin?
Speaking from my own, talk less, listen more.
Beautiful.
Leave more space.
Yeah. Be okay to let them be. Be okay with the silence. Be okay to let them process. Be okay to come up with those head-based stories, and then maybe once the head's kind of got bored of telling its story, it will go quite naturally. So silence for me is okay.
Yeah. If I can add my experience with that, that was feedback I got regularly when I first started coaching, even before mBIT came along. So I had to recognize that I had that tendency, and then become aware when that tendency was popping up in my coaching sessions, and then had to literally go, Beth, shush, Beth, don't say anything. Give it 3 more seconds, 4 more seconds, 5. And it was like an hour in my coaching session. But it took, it made all the difference.
Yeah. So in order for me to get out of my head and into my body and to be quiet and be okay with silence, what else do I need to do?
Lower your expectations. Oh, sorry.
So lower expectations, possibly go in with no expectations almost. But who said breathe?
Me.
Yeah, Robin, talk to me about breathing.
So we need to be breathing at the coherent rate. But in order to get rapport, you need to start breathing at their rate and then go into the breathing.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Breathing.
So a double check that you yourself haven't come out of coherence, especially if the client's a little bit difficult or resistant. It can be really easy to kind of come out of coherence ourselves and then not even be, neuroceptively aware of that and try and carry on. So just kind of checking in with ourselves, a few minutes breathing. You could even say to the client, we'll breathe together again. Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
Perfect, thank you.
Here, at this point, as coaches, before you go into a session with a client, what prep work do you do yourself to bring yourself into, I suppose, the zone or into coherence before you actually see the client face to face? Just curious to know.
Yeah, beautiful question. And I will answer from my perspective in a minute, but I'm going to throw it open first, because what we're now talking about is the very bottom of the roadmap that just kind of casually says preparation as if it's not. But actually, that preparation is really key. And some of that preparation happens before you even meet the client. So even when we talk about preparation, we often start from rapport. But there is preparation you do for yourself before that. So what's your routines before you see a client? What routines and discipline do you have to set that whole session up for success? Part of which will be presumably some form of breathing coherent pattern.
I do my coherent breathing for, 3 minutes or 4, however long it takes me to get into it.
Yeah. And do you monitor that for yourself as to whether you've gone in, or do you plug yourself in and physically check?
You know what? I haven't, Suzanne, so that might be something that I'll look at doing as well. Just, I haven't bought the app thing yet, but I've got one on my phone. So I might just use that for myself as well. Yeah,
it's a good check sometimes to just make sure you are where you think you are. To have that biofeedback. I know some of you will know that I had a stroke and I have a cardiac condition now since November last year, and I struggle more to get into coherence than I did because my ANS is still not back fully functional. And so for me, I haven't got the same level of neuroception that I had. And sometimes I'll think I'm okay and I'll plug myself in and my coherence level's quite low. So having that biofeedback is really, really good for you to really get to know what your body's doing rather than thinking, and especially if something's going on, if you've got any illness going on, or you've got, all of us at the moment have a level of stress running because of COVID and lockdown and everything that's going on, that will affect your ability to get into coherence. It will change your ability. So you might have to work a little bit harder to get into coherence because there's a low level of stress you're not even aware of, because we adapt really beautifully as human beings.
Yeah, saying that, Suzanne, that morning I'd had a bit go on. So I think a lot of that would have been me.
Yeah.
And thank you. Yeah.
Your beautiful client will pick up on that outside of their conscious awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
We know about entrainment, right? So, beautiful. So what other practices do people have pre-seeing a client to set themselves up for success?
I just make sure that that I have everything, that I've got paper for them to write on if they want to. There's water there, there's tissues, that the room looks and feels inviting.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And we know, autonomic safety is key. that all contributes to you feeling autonomically safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I have a whole big routine that I do before I meet with a client, and I would suggest that everybody kind of develops something similar, so that even if it's just like a checklist of, have I gone over their notes? Do I know who they are? Do I know what their main problem might be today? What did we talk about on our last session? And then doing a whole bunch of me stuff, making sure that my energy is clear, making sure that I'm in coherence, making sure that I've taken my head off and put all of my shit outside so that it doesn't come into their session. And also between clients, between coaching on days off, I've found that regularly doing balanced breathing, like I have a couple of alarms on my phone that go off at certain times during the day, and I'll stop what I'm doing and sit down and do some balanced breathing for 5 minutes. Beautiful. And since I've been tracking it, and I notice the difference when I'm not doing it. I notice the difference in the numbers on the app when I'm doing the breathing, and also in my performance.
Beautiful. Now I'm going to jump over to Dara. Dara, I don't know if you caught that comment, but I'm going to guess you would have something to add to that in terms of the difference that a regular breathing practice makes above and beyond what you do immediately before a session.
Yeah, sorry, I had to move there. I was disturbed. Yeah, I think it's all really lovely getting into a state just before you coach, but the goal is to be able to be in that state all of the time, and for you to be out of it exceptionally, and then to recognize it and get back in. And my experience is that if you do practice, Steve Elliott has always said, if you do balanced breathing for 20 minutes a day for 40 days, it becomes your default way of breathing. My experience of that was that it didn't, because I used to breathe really, really shallowly, and it took me about 120 days. And a bunch of us mBIT coaches together and trainers did do that, and we all noticed a big difference in our general way of being. But then I kind of thought, well, why do I stop at 120 days? There's no point in stopping. Just do it every day. So I do a daily practice of 21 minutes first thing in the morning, and it does change my general way of being. So I am generally coherent. And then when I'm out of it, I bring myself back into it, rather than generally being incoherent and bringing myself into it.
Yeah. And I'm going to guess that the more you do that, the more your neuroception also develops, so that when you do drop out of it, you notice much quicker.
That's it. Yeah. Really.
So there's like a double benefit.
Very aware of it.
Yeah, double benefit.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I'd add to that kind of prep that no one's mentioned yet, which is part of my, I guess, what Grant would have called life design, is gratitude. And I have a regular gratitude practice that I believe has fundamentally rewired my brain. I was a little bit of a glass half empty person. And that's not particularly helpful when you're coaching. So gratitude has rewired that for me over the longer term. So linked with regular breathing and gratitude, the two of those for me has become a daily routine. And then I always do, prior to a coaching session, I do additionally breathe for 2 or 3 minutes deliberately to get into coherent. I also, most of you know, I have a Christian faith. I also pray prior to that client coming in, but that fits my faith structure. So whatever kind of spiritual component you want for creating that sacred space, for holding the space for the client, then build that in as well as part of your prep.
Okay, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Suzanne, because I thought I was being a bit weird.
Hey, just because I do it doesn't mean it's not weird, right?
And I've done it, right through. In my other field of work as well. But just a quick one. I heard a mention of 21 minutes, with regard to the coherent breathing. Is that right? 21 minutes. Any reason why 21?
I'm going to throw it back to Dara.
Yeah,
Yes,
I just want to do 20. It just resonated with me 21 minutes rather than 20. So I kind of quite liked it being odd. And I liked the link with trees in it too. So it resonated with me 21 minutes. So I just do 21 minutes.
And you do it in one singular block, is it?
I do, yeah. Yeah, one block, yeah.
Okay, so if I could just flick across to Shelley, you have times in the day when you do your breathing. So what would that basically add up to approximately?
Oh, I usually, again with the numbers, I usually sit down when I said 5 minutes before, it's usually 6 minutes and 29 seconds.
Okay.
It's just because I also recite a bit of a mantra in my head while I do it. And it always I want to finish the mantra and I always get to it just happens at 6 minutes and 29 seconds. So I do that, like I have 3 alarms that go off throughout the day for that. Plus I do probably a good 10, 15 minutes worth of balanced breathing with my morning meditation.
Right. Okay. That's quite a bit of work, prep work that goes into yourself. So we've got to fix ourselves up so that we can bring ourselves in a coherent space and pass on that energy then to the client.
Totally.
And exactly, and that actually showed through in how Beth, right? She demonstrated how she brought the client very, very gradually, down.
Now, if Beth had not been in coherence and had been in a super sympathetic state,
yes,
she would not have been able to kind of pull me with her. I would have been able to resist her. Yeah. Crystal, you had your hand up.
Yes.
I just wanted to say I've been doing breathing with Dara since the lockdown in March. And I've also done some other breathing as well. And I did a session with Elsa 2 days ago, where I did the whole in-braining session with her just for practice. And the difference, I did a 40 minutes breathing exercise before I started with her. And it was just amazing, the zone that I was in. It was such flowing, beautiful, just going with whatever. If my question was wrong, it didn't matter. I would just correct it and do something else. It's so important that we as coaches do the breathing ourselves. We can't teach it to people and not practice it.
Absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And if you've got a client who is, not in coherence and they're either stressed, or I have a client at the moment who's pretty much living her whole life in dorsal vagal kind of withdrawal. If I wasn't in coherence, she would suck me into that state as well. I'd get knocked off balance.
From my perspective, it was really an amazing exercise, and I really enjoyed it because I'm very much a head person. So for me, it takes time to let go, connect with my heart, get that breathing going, and she did it beautifully. And I actually said to her afterwards, I enjoyed her tone of voice and I enjoyed the pace. So yes, it does work. From a client perspective, it worked beautifully.
Beautiful. And anyone who's done Master Coach would be able to talk to you about voice prosody and tone and all of those things that absolutely link straight into the ventral vagal system.
One comment on earlier when Colette was talking about compassion. I did wonder, Colette, whether you were meaning appreciation and gratitude when connecting to the heart initially.
Yeah, I did go into gratitude first, and what feel your heart, be grateful for your heart. Can you feel it beating? It took her a while to sort of get into that, and then she actually could feel her heartbeat. And so I did do that first.
Good call, Dara, because I had picked that up as a highest expression, but if it was getting the positive feeling, so I apologize if I misread into that.
It's a choice of word, I think.
Yeah. And talking back to that, you know, when we do the balanced breathing with someone and we say, if you can just feel a positive emotion in your heart, and this might be compassion, appreciation, gratitude, or whatever. I don't know about you, but for me, some of them are far easier to feel than others. So if I just sit there a minute and you put your hand on your heart and feel compassion. For some of you, you'll do it straight away. For others, you'll have to maybe go via the head to remind yourself what compassion is, and then drop to the heart to feel it. If I say to you, feel gratitude, something you're grateful for, is it easier than compassion to feel gratitude? And then if you play with appreciation and you say, well, let's feel into something we're deeply appreciative of. So being aware that different people have different meaning and relationship to certain words, and compassion, I'm going to go off target, right? But compassion for me is a highest expression. We know with highest expression, you can only truly be at any of the highest expressions if you're in the highest expression of all of them. So for me to truly feel compassion, then I need to also be within creativity and courage. Have I gone too far? Ignore me if that's thrown you. Come back to, for some people, it's easier to feel some words than others, some states than others. So calibrate your client. Ask them what one they'd like to feel. Take them on the easiest route. Because when you're in those baby steps down the bottom, still in the prep, doing the breathing, you certainly don't want to lose them. You're taking them on the start of a journey. You want to make sure that they stay with you and making it easy. And, you know, I would think most people, do I mean most? I probably mean most people would have something in their life that they're grateful for or appreciative of. And then go ahead, Emily.
I also, speaking of gratitude, I think it's also really helpful when you express gratitude to your dear head, and that it's being heard and listened to as well, because especially if you say, can you go out now, go into your corner, it might be slightly offended. So if you say, you know, if you really express gratitude and it feels like it's important, that it has a role to play, but for now, please vacate, then it might be slightly easier. Yeah. Again, speaking of personal experience.
Yeah, and probably there would be a slight difference with every client you work with, and some will respond really well to the, you know, the harshness. Actually, I need a firm line and you've crossed it, and that's okay. And for others, they'd want that. So it's all about the calibration. How do they respond to what you've invited them to do? And if you lose rapport or you take them out of coherence, then you got to retrace your steps, come back and rebuild that, and then go back in a different way. That's why it's so important to keep calibrating all the way up the roadmap. It's almost like I see the dot down the middle of the road as calibration and rapport. Those two just keep going all the way down every step of the roadmap. It's not something you just do at prep and then you stop. You just keep going. That was a great discussion from your starting with a client, Colette. Thank you for that. We've been an hour just talking about the roadmap for one client. It's amazing, eh? Any other comments about, because we haven't really gone up the roadmap particularly. It's been kind of based around the roadmap, but not fully. Any other comments about the roadmap that when you knew it was about the roadmap, you wanted to come and ask a particular question, or is there a part of it that isn't as clear as other parts that you just want some clarity on, or?
Suzanne, can we talk a bit about the congruence phase, please?
Yes, is there anything in, I laugh because every time we talk roadmap, congruence comes up. And I think there is a little bit of it's the most complicated step in my view. So is there a particular question that arises for you in relation to congruence?
Yes, I think because we've all been with different trainers, there's a bit of a different approach to the congruence phase.
Yep.
And I hear you talking about resource or value that you take through where we didn't really do it that way or were taught that way. So if you can just quickly just give us how you see congruence and how that works into the process as well, please.
Okay, so there is no right way of doing mBIT. There is a roadmap, there's a heuristic, and we all go our own way up the roadmap. So yeah, I'm more than happy to share mine. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just the way I do it. Okay, so communication, you're going to go through the 9 prime functions and make sure you've got communication across all 3 brains. And that will just beautifully begin to weave into those questions that start to get them to work together. Oh, so, you know, the heart just heard the gut say this. What does the heart say about that? Or what would the gut need in order to come into play with the heart on that? So you start to work them together rather than as separate entities. And it's just a gradual process of bringing them into alignment. And it's still weaving around wherever you need to go, led by the client. It's not necessarily in foundational sequence. You absolutely get led by the client and where they take you. Once you feel like they're all in agreement and they all know where they're going and they all say, yeah, I'm happy to go there, that's my stage 1 of congruence, is getting them all into agreement. Once they're all in agreement, I will go back to the heart and I will start an absolute foundational sequence. And I will ask the heart, what's the resource or value that would mean that this just, like, there's no way this is not going to happen, basically. What is just going to make it easy and smooth? And so if you've been working on, I don't know, I mean, a lot of my work's around stress and anxiety. So let's say it's about returning to work after some time off. And then you get to the point where the heart says, yeah, it does want to, and it wants to build this relationship back up with the boss that they'd been bullied by or whatever. And the gut is ready to be, you know, to take action on that. And the head thinks it knows how it's going to do it. You go back to heart, what's the resource or value? And I'm trying to feel into that. What would be a realistic value or resource? It might be about trust. Go, okay, so talk to me about this trust. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is there a picture? Is there a metaphor? Yeah, I get this picture of 2 hands holding. Beautiful. Tell me about that picture. What do you notice about the hand? Is there a color? How are the fingers linked? Is there a feeling that goes with that, a sensation? Is there a texture? Is there, and you just build up whatever characteristics you can. That's your NICE, and you're going to suggest how you can make that feeling even more powerful, constantly calibrating, because you might suggest something and they go, oh no, that doesn't fit. You go, okay, turn it back. Or you can be really cheeky and leave them a dial for all those modalities. Say, just turn all those dials just till they're all at exactly the right level, so that they're, you know, you want to go back to work now. You want to run out that door and go back to work now. You're so ready. Once you've built that up, you're then going to take that up to the head brain, and you're going to go around the foundational sequence with that built up, beautiful, really motivated, enthusiastic version of whatever this is. Now, officially in the roadmap, that's the second stage of congruence. The next stage is highest expression. Sometimes I'll join those 2 together. And as I go round with the NIE version of the resource, I'll also build in the highest expression. But it depends on the client and the circumstance. Sometimes I'll go back round again. Once I've done the NIEs once, I'll go back round in foundational sequence and go to highest expression, where the language moves to the kind of doing and being, very much more kind of like less conversational at that level. You're guiding them around this beautiful final meditation that, you know, just sets everything in place and puts the icing on top and the cherry on top of that. So officially on the roadmap, congruence is its own level. And in the way I teach it as 2 separate steps. One is about getting agreement, and one is about taking the resource or value and then doing the NIs on that and taking it around foundational sequence. Now, as far as I know, that is true to the mBIT grant taught. If people have changed that and adapted that and done something different, I can't really comment on that. Because 1, I don't know what they're doing that's different. And 2, I don't know, I've not had the conversation with them about their intention for why they've changed it. So I can't really comment on that. So I guess your job is kind of just weighing up the intention of what I've said congruence is, and then working out how you do that slightly differently by how you've been taught to do it.
Thank you. It's the same. It's just another wording, and but it is doing that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's terminology, because I don't think all trainers use the word resource. I think they just, whatever comes up, it's your metaphor. And the metaphor generally is what you then enhance, which really brings that person from 90% sure they're going to do something about it to 140% sure they're going to do something about it, because they really connect with it and embody it. And and you can bring in future pacing in it. I worked with a woman yesterday, and she felt she'd done everything already by the end of our session, it was just, when you connect to it and you go into this somatic with it, there's just no way that they're not going to do what they want to do.
That's the gist of that step, is making it foolproof, basically. I love working with metaphors. Not everybody comes up with a metaphor. So it's about finding a form of words that allows them to bring up whatever's right for them, that you're not fitting them into a box. Because if I force someone to think of a value or just a resource or just a metaphor, then I'm kind of saying you've got to fit on this route. So it's allowing the client to come up with what's right for them, remembering that once you've been all the way around and you've done the highest expression, you're then going to be back at heart and you're going to ask what wisdom emerges for them. So there's another step that's not a doing step, but it is that conversational. So is there a new wisdom that emerges for you now that you weren't aware of before? And that would be what I would really ramp up in terms of taking it out into the real world and applying and future pacing and planning around and all of that.
I think what I've been taught is to ask what gift does the heart have to give for them to work together in this process? So then it can either be a value or a resource that comes up and it works beautifully, and then you take that around.
Yeah, I try that on and I go gift. It doesn't quite work for me. Maybe that's familiarity with what I do. But yeah, gift to me is something very different. And it doesn't necessarily come from the heart. It's what resource or value needs to be added into the whole mix. You take it in at heart level, but it may not be the heart that provides the resource or value. So yeah, each to their own, right? There's no one right way. And you know what it's like, once you get familiar with one way, it's far easier just to do the way you're familiar with. So I'm sure what you're doing works, that, use what you're familiar with and throw everything I've said out with a pinch of salt. Any other questions about, the roadmap or anything we've brought up today? Anything else you hoped would be covered? Trying to remember when we said we'd go next time. I know I've got another topic in for the next one. I think it might be nicks and nibs next time. Oh no, calibration. Nice. Calibration next time.
Oh, right. Good. Yeah.
So many different components of calibration. We tend to have our own preferences, bits we notice really, really well, and then always good to.
When's that one, Suzanne?
Having just shut my diary again.
Sorry, of course, only me.
It's Friday night next week.
Next Friday, perfect.
Yeah, so Auckland time, Friday evening, 8 o'clock, 24th.
So 5 o'clock here, Friday, perfect.
It'd be nice also then to focus a little bit on calibrating when we're working online versus calibrating when we're working face to face.
Yeah, beautiful.
That'd be useful.
Yeah, very different. Very different. I mean, there's some similarities, but very different skill. And as I said earlier, I'm in this beautiful course at the moment, and today we did a whole load of thing around autonomic state and online in relation to kind of the generalities of that little screen that you have on Zoom, and literally feeling into your own state. So if I come here, what happens in your body, as opposed to if I'm kind of back here, what happens to your body? Does it depend what's in my background? So, you know, I've got a dark window one side and I can see pictures and a curtain the other. What does that do? What would it be if I had just a plain screen behind me? So yeah, we can play with that in terms of you know, calibrating autonomic state as well, and when that might go off. And it might go off and you might go, well, what the heck happened? I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything. And it's nothing to do with something I've said or done. It's something they've become aware of, either behind me or in my posture, or, you know. Yeah, so it's interesting. And the whole thing about eye contact, in that because I'm looking at you, you're not getting my direct eye contact, which you would get if I looked in my camera. So there's a difference in that.
Sorry, Suzanne, on that, there's no right or wrong as to whether the client has their eyes open or closed either?
No, not at all. It's partly, you know, you might invite at certain points, or you might give an option, but be quite deliberate with which option you leave as your second, because that's likely the one that they'll follow. So if I want you to close your eyes, I would say, you know, you might like to leave your eyes open, or you might like to close them now. You're much more likely to close them because it's come second and I've put the embedded command in, close them now, as part of that instruction, if you like. So conscious and deliberate language, that's basic NLP, really.
Yeah. So is it ideal for them to have them open or closed, or there's just no ideal?
There's no ideal, I don't think, because, I mean, even if you feel in for yourself, if you're trying to communicate with the heart, let's say you're trying to communicate with a value or a feeling, is it easier to do it with your eyes open or with your eyes closed?
Closed, yeah.
So for some it might be closed, I would imagine. For some others it might be open, especially if there's any sense of lack of safety. The minute there's any lack of safety, you know, you're likely to want your eyes wide open.
One of the things, one technique I've learned, and I'll share this and see if you like this, is when people have their eyes active, then they're more likely to be in their head or jump back into their head, right? Because it accesses more images and things. So if they can lower their eyes or just fix their eyes on a single point and keep it really still, but turn their, I use a phrase or the language, turn your vision inward. So your eyes are really still, but you're not really seeing anything. That way they can have that safety. Their peripheral vision will be activated if they need anything. But it's the technique to help calm the mind. And you can just say, you can just lower your eyes and just let your eyes focus subtly on one, and you can just bring your hands in front and kind of point just some little spot in front of you and just let your eyes rest there, so that you can, and you know, guide that. So that's a third option as well.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. Peripheral vision. If you want to play with peripheral vision, another way of calming the system. So yeah, we can play with that next time. Maybe we'll get adventurous next time and send you off into little groups and you can calibrate each other. We haven't really done that on the wisdom call much.
Be fun.
Be fun?
Yes.
Actually have a go.
Yeah.
And it's a good idea when we do that to do them in triads, because someone else will see something completely different, even though you're looking at the same thing. And that's normal. You expect that. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
This is very helpful.
Good.
Yes.
Good, because it was a bit of a change of style tonight. I thought, well, you know, let's put a topic in, and I've done the next 3 now as topics, and then maybe beyond that we'll think about whether or not we go back to maybe a peer coaching, or that you know, consecutive coaching. That was a bit of fun that we did. Maybe do more of a practice, having gone through the model and some of the skills. It might be a good idea then to split into pairs and actually do some practice coaching. Could have a whole session on, you know, coaching in threes, where one person coaches, one person is coached, one observes, and just see whether or not anything's changed, having gone and deconstructed the process again and reminded ourselves of some of the key points of it. So yeah, think about what you want 3 or 4 sessions down the line, and we can build that together. And the other thing, just to throw into the mix, the Global Wisdom Support Call was always monthly, and I've run it, I think, for about 7 years now. I brought it on to weekly to help with COVID, to keep the community kind of vibrant and supported. But there is a lot of other stuff going on. Dara, you do your beautiful breathing one. Liz is doing, you know, the trainer development group, the Loving Your Life group. Crystal's doing the business one at the moment. And so I'm just beginning to wonder at what point I drop back again to either fortnightly or monthly. So have a think about that. It's part of me is reluctant to do it. I think we had 21 people on here tonight, and I'm like going, oh, I'm really reluctant to do that because there's 21 people who are pitching up. But on the other hand, it's a big time commitment. So yeah, just beginning to think about that in terms of at what point do we go back to what was normal, or have we created a new normal? Is there enough to keep you interested to keep going to do the weekly ones?
Okay.
And I'm kind of open to either way. I just want to make sure that I'm doing what you guys want, rather than me offering something, you know, and it not really being serving your needs, really.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you
Been
so
lovely.
much.
Yeah,
I'm going
lovely
to
to
stop the
see everyone.
recording.